Welcome back to the show. An episode today that I have really been thinking about a lot, and I think, when it comes from the perspective of somebody who, we're in the people business. We are in the business of improving the performance of the people who work in practices. So how to better serve your patients, how to be better in your role if you're on the team, how to build a team that is executing at higher standards and levels if you're the doctor, right? But today, what we're going to talk about is how to leverage technology to improve the patient experience. And I put a big emphasis on how to improve because there is a huge difference between having technology and using technology to actually get the result you're looking for. Okay, so what I'm going to dive into today is ultimately, number one, why this is really now an expectation. This is no longer really an option, right? It's like you can't, it's hard to get away with just not embracing any of the technological advancements that have happened in the industry. But we also want to understand, what is the intent? What do you want to, and what should you be leveraging technology to better the patient experience, to better your workflows, to improve the systems that you have in the practice? And then, and to be honest, what I think will be the most helpful for you, we're going to talk about how people do it wrong, how people get sold this idea of there's a technology out there that's going to solve all my problems, and if I just put it in place, right, it's going to improve the outcomes for the patients, the experience for the patients. Well, what we find is very often that is not what actually ends up happening. So what I want to do today in this episode is dissect what are those common themes, how can you prevent it from happening in your office, and if you already have a bunch of new technology in your practice, how to make sure that it is doing what it's supposed to do, not just existing and actually making it worse for your patients, right? So let's go ahead and dive in, right? So as I said, what you have to understand is when a patient reaches out to your practice or interacts with your practice, we cannot take the excuse of, well, that was the technology. Because that's not how your patient sees it. Your patient sees it all as the same thing, whether it's the technology or it's a person or if it's you. The patient sees it all as the same. It's all a part of their experience. So the text reminders, that's still part of the experience. If those are annoying, that's part of the experience. Just because it wasn't a person who sent it doesn't mean it doesn't count. Doesn't mean that that being wrong can be right because it wasn't an actual person doing it, right? And especially when you get into talking about how we're the different applications of AI, right? And how that is either going to improve, change, or inhibit our way and ability to connect with patients, okay? 72, this is in 2024, so last year, 72% of patients under 40 expect digital communication method. So, what you also need to be able to do is read through some of these statistics, right? So I talk about this a lot, and there's tons of statistics out there that are like, you should only text people and you should only message people. And okay, people prefer to text to solve quick hit problems. Yes. That does not mean, and how too many people take it is, people only want to communicate via text. That's not how that works. That's not what that means. So right off the bat, before we talk about any of this, what I hope you can hear loud and clear today, when you read statistics presented by tech companies or institutions or publications that are being paid to advertise for tech companies, which, by the way, tech companies have a ton of money because they're all funded by a bunch of people, right? So you have to be able to read through that, because every statistic about technology and how it's good is paid for by the person who wants to sell you the technology. Just fun fact. This show has no sponsors. It will never have sponsors. I shouldn't say never, but it probably won't have any sponsors because I'm the sponsor at the end of the day. And what you're going to get is what you actually need to hear and know. So not that any of those people are bad, not that those companies are bad, not that technology is bad. I'm just saying, before we get into this, I hope you understand every statistic that you see about messaging and anything around technology, right, you have to take with a grain of salt. You should actually do that about everything, not just technology. Okay. Anyways, when you think about technology, yes, people want it, right? So it's 2025. People want you to have technological applications in your practice. They want you to be moving at the pace of the world, if not a little bit quicker, because, we're humans and we all have very high expectations of pretty much everyone around us, except for ourselves, interestingly enough. But that's, again, another topic for another day. People who want you to do more with technology, patients who ask for technology, and they might not ask for it. They might just say in a way of like, your system is outdated. What you should read when you see all the statistics about how people want to have more technological advancement, how they want to be able to do things quicker, faster, all those things. It actually doesn't mean they want to talk to robots. It doesn't mean that they only want to deal with robots. It means they want convenience and speed. And so what we got to figure out, and what you need to be able to read through is, right, it's how do we use the technology to make the people more effective so that we can provide the quickest and best service to the patients who are coming into your practice every day. That's what we're trying to solve here, okay? So let's go ahead and dive into really the positive. So when you think about technology, right, well, what are the positives? What can technology do for your practice that is actually going to improve the patient experience? Okay, number one, if you do it well, you can actually standardize the standard. That sounds a little silly, but you can standardize what you're delivering to your patients. So if you have a small team and you have they're well-trained and you have great internal systems and processes, and you are really like going through your day-to-day, delivering a gold standard patient experience, okay? What technology has the opportunity to do for you is it can standardize that in a way where even the interactions that you don't have face-to-face or are being sent out can actually maintain and live up to that standard, okay? But they don't replace it. They don't replace what you have in place. They don't replace the experience that you provide. They should actually just scale it, okay? Dental intelligence, right? One of the bigger players in the dental industry, right? Great statistic here, but also if you read through it, it's kind of like, oh yeah, well that makes sense. Okay, so I'll read this to you, right? Practices using data dashboards to track patient engagement have up to 2 times higher reappointment rates. Okay, let's dissect that statistic. Practices using data dashboards to track patient engagement have up to 2 times higher appointment rates. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that there's a group of practices who have access to this information because of the technology that they have applied to their practice. That maybe if you're still working on some other system, you don't even have visibility into, right? So like that's a great example of a technology that can provide you visibility into information that can allow you to make better decisions and better outcomes for the patients. But there's a very important caveat there. That is the good side. And what that is describing is the people who use it. Okay. One huge flaw when you do any tech addition or you add to the tech stack in your practice is, and you should ask yourself, is this going to get used and by who? If you can't answer the question, will we use it and who is going to use it? Like I need their names. You shouldn't buy it. There's a lot of great stuff out there. But at the end of the day, if you use it, it probably will be a net positive. If you don't use it, it's probably just going to be an expense that you add to the overhead that you forget about and we don't use. And therefore, you don't get the outcome, right? And the goal of all these people and all these companies is actually to make a better experience for the patient, better outcomes for the practice. But they'll tell you this. If you call any tech company that serves your industry, right? I promise you, if you ask them, hey, what's your biggest problem? User adoption. And user adoption is whether or not the user, uses the platform, uses the technology, actually does and uses what it has to offer. So don't be so excited about it without going through the process of saying, am I going to use it? If not, who on the team is going to use it? And how are we actually going to watch that? Then you can have positive benefits. But this is a great statistic, and it's very clear. If you use technology, it will most likely have a good impact on your practice. Okay? All right, let's look at another one. Next Health. Automated recare follow-up increases reactivations by 20 to 30%. So the opportunity with technology and automation is if you got a system that works when people are doing it and you can just set that on auto, right? It's like a great financial decision is to set up auto savings to where every month, every time you get paid, there's a certain amount that's going into savings and you just don't get to touch it. Because we as people, if we just get to look at the money in the account, we're just like, ooh, well, what can I spend that on? What can I go buy with that, right? But auto saving prevents you from making a bad financial decision. Just like using technology to automate systems that have already been proven to be effective can actually increase their effectiveness because they can do it 24/7. They can do it all day. They can do it on weekends, right? So those things are very positive, right? But the bottom line is technology should allow you to better execute the good behaviors and proper standards that you set in your practice. If you use it and if the system was right to begin with, okay? Now, let's go through the flip side to that. So there's a lot of positives. It can make your life a lot easier. But I want to talk about a few specific technology systems, and I'm not going to use specific names, but I want to just talk about the function and what we see happening that actually doesn't get the result you're looking for. Okay, so let's start with online scheduling, right? So online scheduling. Like I was in Michigan just a couple months ago, and I was talking to a group of doctors, and I was like, "Well, how many? Where did your new patients come from, right?" And you should be able to answer this question too. Of all the new patients who come to your office or reach out to your practice, by what means do they typically reach out? What is their initial point of contact, right? And like every time I do this, it's still like 90% are coming through the phone, right? But there's this one person that was like, well, all of our patients schedule online. It's like, well, are you sure? Well, I feel like most of them do. I was like, okay, great. Well, feelings aren't facts, so that's different. But when you look at online scheduling, what's the positive? Patient can schedule at their convenience. They can get on the calendar without having to talk to somebody. But the reality in action of how that works is the setup is usually off, and then patients are booking things at times for procedures that are incorrect, and then you have to go back and redo it again. And your new patients actually still want to have a conversation with somebody, and we don't know what they need yet. So if a new patient does an online booking for a 30-minute appointment, but they never have a conversation, that's not going to be a cleaning, it's only going to be an exam, then they come in and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? I thought I was going to be able to do everything in 30 minutes, and I was really excited about that. And now we've offered the technology for convenience and speed, but the outcome is actually a patient who also probably doesn't show up because there's a very, very low commitment rate when it comes to scheduling something online. So like when you consider these things, you also want to understand, well, where am I applying this? Online scheduling oftentimes is much more effective for existing patients. New patients, it's kind of hit or miss still. I'm not saying that someday it's not going to be better, but I'm telling you right now, the existing patient who's just trying to get back on the schedule for a predictable number of appointment types, right? That's one thing. Being able to send somebody a link to schedule the specific procedure that you know is right for them next, that's one thing. But offering a free-for-all to the world to put things on your schedule that they might not show up for, that they're going to cancel last minute for, right? All of those things are the pitfalls, right? It's the flip side that you just have to be mindful of as you think about applying some of these things into your practice, okay? So next, text confirmations and reminders. Okay. So, what's great? The statistics on texts being opened, right? So the text open rate it hovers right around 90%. Whereas like an email open rate is going to be somewhere between like a 20 to 50%, right? Now, those are just general open rates, right? It might not be for your specific thing. So at first glance, well, we should definitely send a bunch of text reminders. But if you're like me, I'm not saying you are, but some people are. And you get a text and you are just anti-blue dot. You're like an anti-red circle on the icon on your phone. It's like, I got to get this down to 0. I cannot have any unread things. I got to get them all out of here, right? Like, to my own detriment, to be completely honest. Like, I'll open things, be like, oh yeah, I'll get back to that later. And then it's not showing as unopened. And then, the 3 weeks goes by and I haven't responded to a friend. Which, now that I'm thinking about that, that's probably something that is sitting in my phone right now, is someone I have not responded to. And I didn't mean to not respond to them. Just the reality is people's days get busy and they open the text that you send. And it's like, respond, why? Do confirm. And then it's just like, well, I'm going to ignore that because it's a robot, right? So the downside with text communications, while it is convenient, while patients very often do see it, they also get very annoyed by it because we think because it's text, we can just hit them like 7 times. And most often what I will find is a practice will put this in place and they will put almost no thought into what is in the text messages. They just take whatever the company gives them. They're like, here's our recommended cadence and messaging. And we're like, okay, great. Yeah, let's do that. But what you don't do is you don't read the texts. You don't actually send them to somebody on the team and be like, hey, does this annoy you, or is it actually creating any value or building the value around the appointment before this patient comes in, right? So if you're doing that, or you're considering adding that to your technology mix, right, you have to ask yourself, what needs to be in those messages? Is it creating value for the appointment, or is it an annoying, pesky little message that you're asking 4 times, even if they respond the first time, right? Again, today is about leveraging technology to improve the patient experience, not be seen as a pest, right? So there's like this whole thing in direct response marketing of you want to be an invited guest, not an annoying pest. The invited guest, when they communicate, it's like, oh, I want to pay attention to this. The pest is one that is ignored. So they might open it, they might read it, but they also are pretty likely to ignore it. Okay. All right. So call tracking. Let's talk about call tracking. So this one is awesome. There's so many great phone systems out there and call tracking systems, and right, they're incorporating AI into these days. And number one, I think they're very, very helpful. I think it can be super informative. But I can tell you, we have a system here that does that. Like, we have a phone system, and it summarizes calls, and it gives ratings on calls, and you can set up different types of calls to where if it says that it's this type of call, it can rate that call based on what it's supposed to be, right? If it's like an onboarding call or a sales call or a support call or whatever. But the downside of that is if you don't set it up right, every piece of information it gives you is not helpful, right? So it goes back to my initial question. If you're going to buy something, if you're going to add some technology to your practice, who's going to use it? And what is the feedback loop? Okay. So like you can say, well, we're going to do some marketing. So I want to get some call tracking lines and I want to track what's going on, right? Well, how often do you actually track it? Are you looking at it once every month, once every quarter, once every year? Or are you actually looking at it at the frequency that you should? Are we taking the time to set it up in a way that's most effective, right? And I'm probably actually just helping out a bunch of people who own tech companies with this episode because they're like, oh, thank God somebody is saying, take the time to do the onboarding, take the time to set it up the right way, right? And it's because what I do is we train people, right? So like, that's kind of what we do. And what you need to understand as you look at any of these options out there is if you're not willing to go through the process to get it set up the right way, you shouldn't buy it. You're wasting your money. But if you're willing to do it, these things can be very helpful. You just have to make sure that you are doing the things and taking the time to set it up in a way that it is going to improve the patient experience, not turn you into a pesty, like just automated message city, right? It's probably not the best way to say that, but details. All right. Okay. In the office visual tools, man, there are some unbelievable new technologies around imaging and it was fascinating. I was at a convention. This is probably a year ago, so it's probably way better now. Right. And it was like taking a picture of the patient and literally showing them that same picture with a completely new smile, right? Now, right off the jump, it's like, wow, that seems like a no-brainer. Of course I would like to do that. Well, what's the downside? And again, I'm not saying any of these are good or bad. Most of these I actually think are great. You just have to understand how to make sure you're putting them in a position to where it improves the patient experience, doesn't set you up for failure, right? So this is a good example where if you do that and you get that in your practice, you got to be ready for the day that you show them the before and after picture and they ask, can I see that rendering you showed me? And they're like, well, that doesn't exactly look like that. Can I get a refund? I liked that better than what I got. Then you can say, well, that's not going to happen. It's like, well, humans are humans and 10% of them are crazy. So somebody is going to do it to you, right? So you just have to be like, you got to take the risk reward. It's like, oh, well, I'm fine with that. That's cool, right? But you do have to understand, right? Being able to show people exactly what's wrong makes a big difference. So as imaging gets better, right, what you don't want to have is a situation where like you're only using a mirror, right? This is exaggerating, but like if you're a dentist and it's like the only way you show people what's wrong is, you know, the x-ray. Everybody has x-rays. If you don't at least have a camera, if we can have some advanced scanning, right? All those things are good. But what you don't need to do is go buy a scanner that's $300,000 or whatever it is that you're not going to use, that you don't have enough patient volume to pay for, that you're going to go in debt to have, right? So for all of these things, like, and this is where it gets, you know, when we start talking about visuals and imaging and all that stuff, right? Like depending on the size of your practice and how productive you are and profitable you are, right? Yes, they're great. You love them. Like if you're a doctor and you're watching this, listening to this, right? You love them. You're like, oh man, I just got to get me one of those. Well, the problem is it's $50,000 to $300,000 and you don't have the money to pay for it. So yeah, it could better the patient experience. But if you don't have enough people coming in the office to where what that does for the patient is going to actually pay for itself, then we need to hold off. You have to be able to make that analysis and say, hey, it's not time yet. I want it. It's going to create something positive for the patient, but I got some other things I need to work on first. There's somewhere else I need to go before I do that. Even though that's going to be the thing that's more fun for you, right? That's the challenge. Because right, as clinicians, you get excited about those things. And then it's like, oh, wait, now I owe $200,000 and I'm in more debt than I had before. And I already have student loan debt and I already have debt on the building and I already have debt on the chairs. And right, like, why add that to the list when there's probably some less expensive technology you could do to scratch the itch that actually moves the needle that you could commit to and actually learn how to do? Because what those technologies are not going to do, right? And hear this loud and clear. They're not going to get any more patients to walk through the front door. They're not going to get any more patients to think that the experience in your office is better than somewhere else. Because most often when I see people buy in-office, like physical technology, we never even talk about it. So if you're going to do that, right now, up until this point, we talk about call tracking and AI and those components and, you know, your patient communication platforms and whether or not you do online scheduling or you have a good phone system, right? All of those things, the patient doesn't physically see, and it's not actually a part of the treatment process necessarily. When you get into investing in technology in your office that is actually a part of the diagnosis and treatment process, what happens so often, and I want to urge you against this, is we buy the shiny new thing and nobody knows how to talk about it. Nobody knows how to use it. Nobody knows how to actually communicate about what it does in the context that is actually good for the patient. So we're like, yeah, we got this new machine. Well, what does it do? Oh, well, let me tell you. You see, it actually will create a 3D rendering of this, and like it goes into the technical explanation, which is what you got excited about buying it in the first place. But guess what? Patient doesn't care. Patient doesn't care. They don't care at all. They only care if it gets them out of there faster because they don't want to be there. That's just kind of the truth. So let's flip the script on that. If you are going to go buy that because you have the money to do it and or your practice is growing enough to where it's going to be able to pay for itself, right? Then how do we actually explain it to the patient? Oh, we've got this new and improved technology and it's going to allow us to better serve you, to get you in and out of here faster and get you results quicker, right? Boom. That's it. That's what the patient wants. Faster results, quicker results, better results. I don't need anything else. If you can give me those three things, invest in that stuff all day if you can pay for it. That's cool. But don't give me the line of like, we need this. It's like, see 10 new patients a month. You have no cash flow, right? In debt up to your eyeballs, but we need a $250,000 laser? What? Next, patient financing. Right? You're like, what is that technology? Yeah, it's technology. It is, how can they immediately get verified for financing on services that maybe they don't have the cash for today? Okay, so we talk about this. Great thing to have in your practice. But you have to do the analysis. Are there enough instances where you are not converting cases for the sole purpose that you can't move them over to some type of simple, basic, monthly payment method? Okay. All right, so you got to do that. And then number two, you got to make sure they're not absolutely robbing you on fees, okay, which oftentimes we don't look at because you don't pay attention to it, okay? And then the other thing you want to make sure you understand is, again, the execution. If you're going to buy it, which you have to pay a certain amount on, you have to make sure your team is actually executing and they're getting trained on how to use it. And that goes for all of these things, right? The number one mistake we see is people do not take the time to set it up correctly and then train the people on the team. And then when the one person on the team who was trained on it leaves, which will happen, they're going to leave. Every single person who works in your office will at some point leave, and you just got to get over it and move on with our lives, right? So if you're a team member, right, you might have worked in a different office than you work in today, like last year, right? That's how life works. People move on. People do different things. People move, right? So you have to understand that training them once, teaching them how to do it once, educating them once, doesn't mean anything. It might solve the problem for like 90 days, right? We train people all the time. And typically about 72 days after learning something, engagement dips. We got to bring it back up, right? It's because we're people. All right. And then just last one, follow-up automation. So if you consider, follow-up systems, automated recare communication, right? This kind of fits into that last note on patient communication before the appointment, but after the appointment, in between appointments and getting people back in, right? It's all the same. You have to make sure you're looking at the messaging, making sure it's actually creating value for the patient. It's not annoying, right? And again, it sounds like I'm oversimplifying it, but it is actually just very simple. You just have to take the time to do it. You just might not want to. You might be hoping that there's this magical place, right? It's like it's me staring at this light. It's probably very bright on my face right now, but like you're just like, oh, there's the light. There's the technology that's going to solve my problems and I'm not going to have to do anything. That shit doesn't exist. That's why you can't find it. That's why all the technology you bought so far hasn't done it, because it doesn't exist. So don't think you're going to get that. There's a lot of great stuff out there. You're going to have to do the work to set it up the right way. And it doesn't usually take that long, right? Okay, so how do we kind of put a bow on this? How do we make sure that, okay, Flint, I get it, right? There's some great things that we can do with technology, but at the end of the day, no matter how far the advancements go, I understand. We have to set it up right. You have to know who in the office is actually going to be utilizing it. And if that person leaves, you cannot just ignore that, because then you're paying for something, which is probably like not that inexpensive, that nobody's using, right? And then it's a cost and it's not creating any value for the patient. And when it comes to physical technology and equipment, right? Do not get the ooh shiny syndrome of the new thing that's going to cost you 150 grand and bring nothing into the practice. It's just a mistake that happens like 17,000 times a day. And it'd be great if you all and we all as a community could just cut it out, right? Anyways, that could be a whole episode on itself, but some could say this already has been. All right. So what are we going to do with this? How do you want to actually take this? And like, what do you, like, you wrap all this up and it's like, Flint, okay, great. What do I do? All right. Number one, you need to go to the 3 technologies you have in your practice today that are patient facing. So whether it's patient communication, whether it's your phone system, whether it's whatever it is, whatever technology your patients interact with the most, you need to audit them. Is it intuitive? Does it bring value to them? If you were to go through that process, do you think it is exceptional? Do you think it is average? Do you think it is annoying, right? And maybe get some other people's opinions on it, right? So, and you know, it's funny, someone who it might be a good, like, use your family. If you got like a cousin or you got a kid who's, you know, different generation, right? Get some different generations to give their opinions on it, right? Is this helpful? Is this annoying? Does this make sense, right? Is it easy? Is it simple, right? Okay. Test the systems. I need you to go through all the things a patient would go to, like go to your website, call your office, right? If you want us to do an assessment of what's going on in your office on the phone component, we can do that. It's called the 5-star challenge. If you look it up, we can, that's free, but you know, you can also do it yourself. Call it practice. What happens? Except for the fact that they see caller ID and it's like, oh, hey, Dr. Smith, what's up? It's like, that's not how we're supposed to greet. Anyways. Okay. And then you want to pick one that you find an opportunity in and improve it. Make it create more value for the patient. Change the verbiage in the text confirmations. Change what is going out to patients after their appointment. Make it better. Make it more human. Even if it's automated, get it to have a little bit more feeling to it, a little bit more human touch to it, because the default on a lot of this stuff is very robotic, and robotic does not create relationships. And if you want patients who pay, stay, and refer, you need to be building relationships. You don't just need to be putting them through this automated process. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. I know we kind of went off on a couple tangents, but I truly just see these mistakes happen so often, and I do not want you to make them. And so if you enjoyed what you heard today, I would love if you would rate the podcast 5 stars, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, send it to your friends. And we will see you in a couple of weeks for the next one. Have a great week. Bye.